It is Saturday, May 10th, and welcome to another edition of our broadcast. So for the first time in 25 years, the UK and the United States have signed a trade deal, which is going to really impact farming, steel, opening up markets that have never been opened up before. It's fair, it's open, it's reciprocal. Let me introduce my guests who are joining us now. Todd O'Neill from the Daily Signal, and Andrew Donaldson, commentator for Young Voices. Andrew, how significant is this deal?
Well, it's one of those things where you just scratch your head and go, why haven't we had a deal with the UK in the last 25 years like you did? Now, some of that, of course, was Brexit, confused things, and different administrations. But yeah, we probably should have had a trade deal with our most important overseas partner and our cousins over there for a long, long time. Now, it is important to note here, just because of the current headlines, Secretary Leonard did come out and say this is not going to affect the 10% tariffs, at least right now. But when you look at what's going on both in the U.S. and the UK, and remember, the UK just took over their own steel industry in Scupworth right now. That's a headline that's underpinning some of this. There's a lot of stuff under the waters on the surface of this. Now, the devil is always in the detail on trade deals, but on the surface, us, the UK, just having an announcement that we're going to do a trade deal, it is a big deal. The details will tell us how big a deal going forward, but this is somebody we absolutely should have an airtight trading partnership with. It's kind of a shame we didn't already do it previously.
You know, Tyler, the conflict between Pakistan and India, if you call it that, is escalating. Where do we stand?
Yeah, we hope for de-escalation, but this is a long-term, very deep-rooted antagonism between the people of India and the people of Pakistan. And you have great resentments, long-running resentments between, Pakistan and India famously had that partition where, you had millions of Muslims moving from their homes in India into Pakistan, and some, Hindus moving away from Pakistan into India. The cultural ramifications of this have been very long-standing, and now, they have this debate over Kashmir. India claims it, and Pakistan also claims it, and this is a troubled part of the world we should be watching going forward. There are also skirmishes that have been breaking out in recent years, occasionally between India and China in the Himalayas. And of course, there's also the issue of Bangladesh right there on the other side of India, which is another Muslim majority country. So India has been, they've been asserting their Hindu nationalism in recent years, somewhat to the detriment of religious freedom in that country, but also, leading to more of these confrontations.
Andrew, transgender soldiers got a blow this last week. The Supreme Court has granted Trump a temporary win by lifting a stay from a lower court which prohibited Trump's policy against allowing transgenders to serve in the military from taking effect. The brief was unsigned and had dissents from, of course, the liberal justices. Listen, serving in the military is tough. And when you think about people that don't want to serve today, it's really admirable that people want to sacrifice it all for us to continue our freedom. But it also demands that you be in peak position, physical and condition and a mental state. And according to the Trump administration, the very fact that someone is transgender means that they may not be in a proper mental state and may inadvertently cause harm to other soldiers. This is what they said about women in the military, and women are still in the military. That's not changed. It's what they said about homosexuals in the military. They're still in the military. How is this going to be any different, Andrew, moving forward?
Well, it'll be somewhat of what you just got into. This is more the middle of the end of the beginning than the end of this controversy. This will go on for a while and go back and forth. I was actually on active duty during Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal. I worked in an office where we directly had to instigate that policy down to our folks. I remember the difficulties, good, bad, and indifferent, for folks that were for it, folks that were against it, folks that frankly were confused, and there was quite a few folks that just thought their lives and careers were getting upended. I suspect one of the things with any of these issues, whether it's gender, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, and now the transgender, is you're trying to do a broad policy on something that really needs to be a case-by-case basis. And the military just can't operate on a case-by-case business. It needs a hard and fast rule, and these things get too sticky. So that's why you get into the legalities of these things. I think this will probably hold up for quite a while, but I don't think we've heard the end of it. And again, we're a country where we have presidential elections every 4 years and Congress every 2 years. You get another administration in that's open to this, they're going to open the gates back up. This will be back and forth. We are far from the end of this situation and this controversy.
Tyler, New York's Attorney General, Letitia James, New York taxpayers will be funding her fight against the Trump administration and our mortgage fraud. You heard that right. Tyler, in New York State's budget, Democrats snuck in a $10 million legal defense fund for elected officials who are sued or prosecuted based on their official duties. This corruption, Tyler, in my opinion, is at its finest.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. The interesting thing is I don't think it's illegal corruption in the sense that in any sort of sense there, because the legislature is passing this. So, you have a situation where they want to scratch their own backs. And because New York is such a Democratic majority state, I mean, a similar thing just happened in Colorado, where there was a very big controversial transgender bill that, parents were rightly up in arms about. And the Colorado State House and Senate, the state Senate changed it in the last minute, the last hours of the night on Monday night, and then sent it back to the House, and they rushed it through. The legislature, when it's dominated by one party, can do this. And we often see it happen, especially in Democrat majority legislatures, where they're trying to change things and get it past the voters before they can know what's going on. I think in New York, this is a similar situation, and I think New York voters need to be aware that this bill was passed. And if they don't want their tax dollars going to support Letitia James in this sort of situation, then they need to be able to, make their voices heard.
Andrew, gain of function research. President Trump recently signed an executive order to end funding for gain of function research, the type of research, Andrew, that notably is seen as the leading cause for the creation of COVID-19 and the rapid spread of the pandemic. Your thoughts?
Probably too broad. We need to have the scientists really dig into this. The good ones, the problem is funding, and we all know how this one works. Funding has now become very much a government business and government money, and money always starts bringing in the questions of why is this funding going here? Why is it for this? In the abstract, in a perfect world, gain of function research is very important, has all sorts of things. The problem is now in the post-COVID war, these things have become very controversial, and it's the government and the researchers' own fault, broadly, bipartisan, multiple presidents, their own fault for how COVID got handled. Now people don't trust this sort of thing. So it's probably too broad. It's understandable politically and cultural in the moment we are in. If we get down the road a little bit, we can probably come back to this. But this is one of those things where we really did need to believe the science, but the science compared to the government, especially when they're taking government money, made themselves distrustful, and this is the end result, good, bad, or indifferent. I suspect we'll probably regret it being this broad down the road, but for right now, this is probably going to be pretty popular.
Tyler, President Trump is headed to the Middle East, his first real foreign trip, not to his allies, but to the Middle East. There's been some grumbling about this. What does he hope to accomplish? And can we finally figure out what the UAE is finally doing in their policies and what their agenda really is? Yeah, well,
those are excellent questions. I mean, we have to keep an eye open on what President Trump is shooting for. It's very interesting to me to see this administration. They're working toward having a deal with Iran to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, and we have to be cognizant. I remember the first Trump administration was very hardline on Iran. President Trump brought back a lot of the same sanctions in this administration. But his Middle East policy, it hasn't fully been defined. So I'm glad he's going over there. I hope that he will prioritize America's interests abroad, as he's always said he will. To me, that looks like being very harsh on Iran and standing up for our ally Israel. But I think he has his plans, and we're waiting on the edge of our seat to see exactly what the president is going to do.
And Andrew, certainly not least, the P. Diddy trial is underway, my man. The whole situation, of course, is a mess, and it is emblematic of the dark side of Hollywood and the entertainment industry. You know, the tragic reality is that most of the people you see on the big screen television are here on radio have gone through trials and tribulations brought about by the entertainment industry in order to get there. I mean, listen, countless entertainers have no doubt faced people just as bad as P. Diddy or worse, whether it's Harvey Weinstein, whether it's Epstein. Entertainment, Andrew, is like politics. Only it affects so many young people, really young people, and tragically, many entertainers, just like politicians, take advantage of young people. They even kill them sometimes to get what they want, and it's covered up. How important is this P. Diddy trial, and why should we care?
Well, broadly to your point about entertainment, I'm a girl dad, so I've had a lot of interesting conversations now that my kids are all basically adults, one's 17, almost 18. My kids are almost all adults, but we had to deal with all the Nickelodeon and Disney controversies that have come over. So it's like they grew up enjoying that stuff, but they also are very aware of how those people have been abused and mistreated, especially the females. And all that stuff because they follow them on social media and they read their books and they've studied. So it changed how they view entertainment. I think the next generation is going to be a lot more cynical on this stuff than we were because we grew up in an era where we just remember, you know, P. Diddy mostly being the guy behind Biggie to start out with, and then he became his own thing. And now you find out that he's allegedly quite the monster. This is something that's really important because here's the other part of this thing that we don't deal with enough as a society. Whether it's a politician or an entertainer, a lot of people knew for a very, very long time, and justice is very slow for these people because they have power and money. That's a conversation that is universal to how our government, how our system of justice, and how our society should work. If we can use an entertainer to get into that, like, no, they did this for 10, 15, 20 years, and nobody felt empowered to do something about it. That's a very worthwhile conversation we can always have when something like this pops up.
Well, let me mention this before I go to Tyler. Disney is opening a major theme park in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
It's really hard to stomach the fact that Disney would do this when they made a stink about Florida having very common sense rules. I mean, Saudi Arabia makes homosexuality illegal. Like if you're openly gay in Saudi Arabia, you will get killed. And it's like, and they had Don't Say Gay. They pushed against this Florida legislation that was all about parental rights in education. And it is the utter height of hypocrisy for Disney, which crowed till the cows came home about Florida having a very small parental rights common sense bill, and then now opening a park in Saudi Arabia, which is not exactly known for tolerance of gay people.
Finally, Andrew, Congressman Ilhan Omar from Minnesota has been ousted from the House Foreign Relations Committee.
Yeah. We're going to see more and more of this. This all started, remember, a couple of years ago when Marjorie Taylor Greene got decommitted. This is going to be the new tit for tat going forward. Whoever's in power, they're going to pick out the more controversial, the louder people. Sometimes justified. I suspect sometimes it won't be justified. In this case, she really has made some enemies and some controversial statements. Should she lost her committee assignments? Probably, but that's also a long list on both sides of the aisles of people that are unfit. But we're going to see more and more of this going forward, I think, in Congress, is where this will be the go-to thing. When you get power, you pick out kind of the loud, controversial figure on the other side. You try to sideline them. The thing about it is though, you're probably just going to platform them even higher in their own caucuses and their own media thing. So I don't know how productive long-term it is, but it does make for a good headline, and it makes you look like you're doing something.
Sal Greco and Leonard Snipes is next. But listen, first-class journalists here. They had no idea what was going to be asked today, but they're always prepared. We'll be back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Armstrong, Armstrong,
I'm reading from the headlines from Politico's article about crime in Mayor Eric Adams in New York City. Here's what it says. Mayor Eric Adams often laments a central paradox of his mayoralty. While most serious crime is declining, New Yorkers, for some reason, don't feel safer. That's because, Sal and Leonard, by the New York Police Department's own metrics, they're not. Somebody's lying. Have you seen this, Leonard?
Yeah,
Do you think people would
that
actually lie about crime stats to make themselves look good?
They're claiming major crime went down across the board. There's smaller crimes, assaults, and lesser crimes are up extraordinarily. So, look, I mean, measuring crime in the United States, I've been doing this now for decades and talking about crime in the United States, and it's almost impossible to explain it all. But we know that fear of crime per Gallup is at its highest level in the history of Gallup's recording of crime. So people are reacting to the smaller crimes that are happening in New York. People are reacting to things that they find disturbing, and that's what's, I think, the heart and soul of the Politico article.
You know, Sal, you're a former police officer, and they're telling us that in New York City, total crime increased every year under Adams' watch, even as New York City has remained one of the safest big cities in the nation on his watch. But here's the other interesting thing, and everyone should read this Politico article. It's pretty good. Murder has declined by 22%, Sal, and shootings by more than 40% since he took office on January 1st, 2022. But here's the issue. Every other type of crime the police department classifies as major is much higher. Why?
Well, actually, Armstrong, violent crime has surged under Eric Adams. I believe violent crimes has been up since he became mayor. I think it's either 28 or 31%. The actual numbers have been posted on Sam Antar's website. That's whitecollarfraud.com. You can follow that to see exactly what New York City's been up to. But what they aren't telling you is the shootings, they're not being reported. They report the shootings as if it has to be founded or they found a shell casing. So if somebody said, I heard something, they don't report it. They have to have some kind of evidence, and we always responded to what they called shots fired. Also, Armstrong, I don't know if you saw, but there was, I mean, rapes are up in this city. It is so bad that they're actually desecrating corpses on the subways in transit, which is a plethora of crimes going on there. So much so that they're throwing extra cops, taking them off other precincts and other areas to flood the subway system and transit because they want to give you the perception that crime is down in transit, and that it's far from that. The reason people don't feel safe is because you aren't. This mayor is incompetent. His entire staff follows suit, and all they really care about, Armstrong, is they're being self-impressed. They love the cameras, and they love partying and hanging out with some seedy, shady people. But yet, they'll come on a camera and tell you, crime is down, look at us, we're the greatest, and they're looking for their next career. It's really sad, and this article is pointing in the right direction, but also you could go on Sam Mantar's website, whitecollarfraud.com, or I believe Reza Chowdhury, who is his partner on X, constantly posts the crime stats, the true crime stats.
So
it's devastating.
let me stop you again. I want to stay with you. I just mentioned to our last panel about how the New York legislature, state legislature, snuck $10 million in the budget for Letitia James to defend herself against the allegations of mortgage fraud. But what is interesting, if you also read what we're reading, the FBI is on her trails. Why? Why would the FBI have an interest in the state attorney general? Sal?
Well, I'll tell you, all of this kind of started when my investigation started after the NYPD terminated me, saying I associated with Roger Stone, who they're trying to call a criminal association, which no one can even define, including the police department. So when we looked into everything, we actually found that Eric Adams and company were hanging out at this seedy place in the Bronx that's a now shuttered restaurant. And the gentleman that really truly owned the place, but he says he's the manager, has a plethora of criminality under his belt. He was a self-admitted criminal and a mob associate who's owned other places and is connected to many, we'll say, Democratic people. So we found that Tish James was the main figure there, and it's a place that had human trafficking reported there to the police department, but we don't know what happened with that report because there was no follow-up, and then Eric Adams became the mayor. So out of this stemmed looking into many aspects of Tish James, because she also should be looked at for associating with a mob associate, which as Attorney General would affect many cases. As you know, Armstrong, she has the right to turn people or convict people in court and make them a convicted criminal, yet she's hanging around them. And we don't know what's really going on there. And then we see that there's a pattern of behavior. Her mortgage, she was signing for mortgages in the 80s, putting her father down as I guess her father was her husband, but that's to get a better mortgage rate. We found out that later on, she has property in Virginia, and she puts it down as her main property, which she can't because she lives in, it's a primary residence, and she lives in New York. So all of this is not just a witch hunt. I know people like to say it's political. People love to use this President Trump defense that really it's only designed for him. He's one of a kind when it comes to how he was targeted. Here, there's a lot of stuff. There's teeth to this. So it's kudos to the FBI finally for looking into this, because I've seen, Armstrong, a pattern, and it seems that many lawyers, also Adam Schiff did this primary residence thing where he signed for a residence in Maryland, but yet he lives in California. You can't do that. Jamie Raskin did this also in Maryland, and we see Tish James as well, and there's others that are now being looked at for doing the exact same thing. So I think, Armstrong, for the sake of the country, these people should be investigated, because if it was you or I, Armstrong, we would be treated exactly the way Tish James is being treated right now.
So let me get to the heart of this issue about crime and families. What does your research tell you about the correlation between strong family structures and lower crime rates?
Armstrong, I'm going to read. Family structure is the strongest, if not the strongest, predictor of violence in the United States by Harvard professor Robert Sampson. We know that the tragedy that we have in terms of people coming into the criminal justice system, I have done hundreds of interviews with individual offenders, and by far the vast majority of them report parental dysfunction at the highest levels. You're talking about brain damage, you're talking about substance abuse, you're talking about PTSD, you're talking about these individuals that end up in the criminal justice system have been brutalized not only by their families and by their communities. Yes, I understand that there are wonderful parents, and regardless as to how hard they tried to be good parents, their kids still ended up in the criminal justice system. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the 75, 80% who come from very, very, very dysfunctional backgrounds. Now, whenever I say this, people say that I'm making excuses for criminal behavior. I'm not. I'm simply going by the research and going by my own personal interactions with criminal offenders. And I've talked to lots of people who have successfully what we call crossing the bridge from a crime lifestyle to a crime-free lifestyle. And I ask them all the time, I said, what's up with the younger people? And they constantly tell me that they have demons that they cannot control. And that's basically due to child abuse and neglect. Why we are so anxious to ignore child abuse and neglect when it comes to the criminal offender population is beyond my comprehension. Nobody wants to go there. Everybody wants to blame the schools or poverty or this or that, when the bottom line behind the crime problem that we have in any city, whether it's New York or any place throughout the country, is based upon the fact that these kids have really difficult upbringings. When you look at data where 50% of the individuals had brain damage from the violence that was inflicted upon them by their families and by their associates, and that the overwhelming majority, 80-90%, are exposed to violence. You look at this data and you're just saddened by the situation. If we could get in and straighten out this issue of child abuse and neglect, crime would go down and go down substantially.
You know, we're going to come back with much more from Sal and Leonard. But remember, this is Mother's Day weekend. Please don't forget about God's greatest gift to you, your mama. And coming up later in the show, Nana May and Dee Dee Bass will join us as we further celebrate the women in our lives, especially our mothers. And we'll be back. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, Sal, given your experience in law enforcement, what's the link from your experience between family erosion and public safety? Especially the descriptions you were making about the subway and the crime, how it's escalating. Explain the correlation for us.
Well, Leonard was hitting on a lot of points before, and to on that point, a lot of, we'll call them, I guess juvenile criminals, or when you happen to run across them, they all usually come from broken homes, meaning they only have one parent or two parents that they don't live together, or they're fighting each other, or is something, or they don't know who their parents are sometimes, or they could be orphans as well. So a lot of that goes to the structure. Family structure is big for one growing up, especially in New York City or in these big, we'll call them big cities. So I mean, just recently we saw, just the other day I believe, these 12-year-old kids that they're saying are part of the Trendy Aragua gang. I mean, how do you think their families are? Do you think these people come from a family, these kids are coming from a family that's well structured, or do you think it's a broken home? I'm not making excuses for everyone, but a lot of the times, Armstrong, I'll be honest, when we have a juvenile or someone in custody, that would be the problem. There's some kind of issue inside of their family. So the most important thing would be you have to keep your family together. It's strong family values is what will keep somebody from trying to go down a life of crime, Armstrong, or get involved with the wrong people. Again, the seedy people in shady places. If you have a strong family structure, that won't happen. So that is one of the main factors we're seeing when we're seeing a juvenile committing crimes, is that their homes, most of the time you're going to hear stories about how their home is, and their home is not structured the way a American family would normally be. So that is probably one of the main factors in what we're seeing. And it's unfortunate because now we have this incident where these 12-year-olds were assaulting police officers. And I believe, yes, they're from Tren de Aragua, but that also shows you, I think there's a failure in their family, how, what's going on there. Because at 12 years old, how are you even allowing your children, who I believe they're not even, they're legally in this country as it is because they're part of this gang. And why are you even allowing them to go out and saying they have no respect for law enforcement? So it's, again, family values.
I saw that video, and I was wondering, is that real? And you just confirmed it for me. It was really sad. I mean, they were babies. I mean, they were fighting, no respect, no honor for what these officers do every day. Leonard, how have media narratives around crime and family shifted over the decades?
Well, we're beginning to look at the whole issue of child abuse and neglect, but not nearly enough. I mean, the media wants to blame institutions. The media wants to blame the schools. The media wants to blame the church, the synagogues, the mosques. The media wants to blame everybody but the parents. And I understand why, because you don't want to pile on people who are coming from difficult backgrounds. But if you take a look again at the statistics, these are FBI arrest data. For the 16 to 20 age group, they have the highest numbers for homicide, the highest number for sex offense, 16 to 20, the highest number for vehicle thefts, the highest number for robbery. When you've got the highest numbers from age categories for arrests per FBI data, at age 16 to 20 for homicides and robbery, we've got a problem. So maybe the media should start paying more attention to the issue of child abuse and neglect. I mean, Frederick Douglass said it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And that's been with me for decades. The whole idea is to let's make sure that our children are raised properly, loved, held, encouraged. If we did that, we would cut the crime problem in half.
Sal, this is a two-part question, actually. What does it mean? We hear this thing about restorative village in an era of digital isolation and these fragmented communities. How can law enforcement partner with families and communities to, you're not going to stop the violence, but drastically reduce it?
Well, there's initiatives that even the New York City Police Department does. It's just one of the things they actually do that's well, where they have, I guess, I don't know, you want to call it like a community night or community get-togethers, and you'll see the videos of the police officers. They play basketball with those in the community, or they have almost like a setup in the precinct or outside the precinct, and they're all eating and having food and sharing a good time, or they're discussing things in the community. And that's kind of how you build trust in the community, once again, with law enforcement, because some things are fractured, or we'll say some people are agitating things or exaggerating things that, there might be incidents that occurred. But that's what you need in order to, build that relationship with community.
Let me interrupt you in a minute. So do you actually have successful models of community policing that actively involve families?
Well, in the New York City Police Department, we had something where they called them like neighborhood, back in the day, neighborhood community officers, which were people that would reach out to families and have these, what we say, like these events where families could get together. Because obviously there's going to be children there. Their parents have to be there. So there were instances of this. I believe now they change it once again. It might be called something else. There's also a community affairs, and community affairs are the ones that will have the events and show up. They actually coordinate these events. So they'll say we'll have something at at the park. And then all the families, all the children show up, and they know who the officers are. And this is where, you bond. You try to bond because obviously there's this perception that, the police target different people in the community and all of that. So they do try to reach out with an olive branch. It doesn't, I'm sure, doesn't necessarily always work, in a broad sense, because, again, you do have those, gang members in the community. But the idea and the concept is what needs to be done. And actually, if it's done at a larger scale, maybe that may be able to corral some of these youths that are running around or might be doing bad decisions, and then say, you know what, I've been doing this, and maybe they meet different people and they, become productive in their life instead of going down the life of crime.
Leonard, where are the local schools, the churches, the civic groups when we were growing up that were there to help rebuild these family-centered neighborhoods? I mean, we had fathers shaping our sense of accountability and discipline. And now we have this reverse generational cycles of incarceration and fatherlessness. Where are they? Why are we here? Why can't we turn back the clock?
We can. There's criminological studies about air conditioning and the fact that air conditioning moved everybody on the inside, and before air conditioning, everybody was outside, and everybody was observing what was going on in their communities. And a lot of times people are taking action. I remember being disrespectful to a Baltimore City police officer one time who we were playing ball in the street, and I made a improper gesture towards a police officer, and a woman up the street, a neighbor, dragged me down to my mother and told me what had just happened, and I was severely punished. The point is that we need to take collective responsibility, whether it's the church, whether it's the community, for the kids in our neighborhood, and we need to send strong messages in terms of what is acceptable behavior. We're not doing that any longer. We've stopped doing that because everybody's inside watching Netflix or watching Armstrong Williams. So the point is that, yeah, communities, churches, synagogues, mosques, we need to take principal responsibility for the kids in our own community, and we need to exert influence to make sure that these people understand, these younger people understand, or even older people understand what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. The community needs to exert its influence. That's the way it's worked for decades and decades and decades. We've gotten away from it.
Sal, I don't know if we can reverse the generational cycles of fatherlessness and the impact that it's had. I don't know if incarceration is gonna slow. Sometimes, Sal, I just wrestle with, can things get any better? I mean, maybe you have some practical steps that communities can take today to restore a sense of shared responsibility for our youth, but they don't just need to restore it for our youth. They've got to restore it for these parents, because these parents are much younger. They don't have our values. They don't understand. Their understanding of morality and right and from wrong is quite different. They feel entitled. They feel as though they've been neglected or abandoned by their parents. They've been bruised and damaged, they've been abused. And so they're just playing this out. And it's just creating nothing but chaos all around us.
Mm-hmm. It's true. But also we can't glorify that other kind of behavior as well as a society, because there's a lot of that going on in this country, whether it be through our culture or social media, or some of these musicians that glorify that they don't have a parent, or this life of crime, and that leaves an impression on a young mind. So that's why it's important that the churches, that the synagogues, that the schools, they reach out. The police officers that are in these community affairs, or as neighborhood coordination officers, reach out to the families of these with children and try to kind of reel them in, show them what things were like, you're saying, back in our day, and maybe you will get enough of these children that as they start to grow older and they have values, will then spread it amongst their friends and go down that path versus the dark path of crime, which unfortunately, Armstrong, especially now, we have an influence of these, again, like Trendy Aragua, people running around, and they'll show you a fast way of making money. It's a short life. It could be a very short life, but these people have influence, and we need to find a way to cut that out.
Well, I'll say this to you as I say goodbye to you and Leonard. Everything starts with the fact, what I respect about you all so much is that you care. If you care, no matter how bleak it is, you're gonna make a difference wherever you are. And it's gotta start there. And these kids need to know that we care. Change starts within, not outside of us. Thank you both for what you do. Happy Mother's Day to your mothers, if they're still with us, or your sisters, your daughters, or whatever. When we come back, we gotta celebrate Mom, man. You gotta do it. Nana and Dee Dee's Up next, we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
You know, I always have this philosophy, don't do as I say, do as I do. And while we're about to celebrate Mother's Day, one of the mothers joining us today, Dee Bass Wilbon, reminding us of the importance of exercise, and it's good for your mental health. It makes sure that you're not spending all your time in the doctor's office, and it's the best medicine for whatever future health challenges you may have. So you gotta take a look at this fantastic package that we put together for you to encourage you. Because listen, every morning, at least 5 days out of the week, I'm up 3:30 a.m. prepping to run at 3:45 a.m., 7 miles. And it's not easy, but my body loves it, okay? Let's take a look.
Today we're tackling fitness over 50 because a healthy lifestyle isn't just nice to have, it's critical. Did you know over 70% of Americans over 50 are overweight or obese according to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey? That's a big deal. Excess weight drives up risk for heart disease, diabetes, and more. But here's the good news. It's never too late to turn it around. To unpack this, I'm talking with a fitness expert and a doctor about why exercise now can rebuild your body's muscle memory and your health.
Staying active over 50 is absolutely essential, not just for longevity, but for maintaining our independence as we get older as well. Because as we age, we naturally lose muscle mass, which is called sarcopenia, as well as losing bone density. So that puts us at increased risk of falling and fractures. And so regular exercise helps us do a few things, which is maintain our strength, improve our balance, and also boost our flexibility.
I rose at dark 30 to meet Clarence Duhart of CD Fit in Georgetown for a high-intensity workout. Clarence's students come from all across the Washington region. People of all ages participate in CD Fit workouts, but on this early morning workout, more than half of them were over 50.
Clarence, I'm going to ask you a question that people don't like that women don't like to answer. Okay. How old are you?
I'm 54.
You're 54?
Yes.
And you've been working out for how long?
All my life.
All your life?
I say consistently since 13.
Okay. And so are the majority of the people in your class, are the majority of them over 50 or at least 50?
Now they are.
Good. Okay, so for people who did not exercise when they were younger or were in a sport when they were younger,
right,
and they just want to come out here and start working out.
Okay, so but for a new person that's coming in, you need exercise. You got to move your body. You got to take care of yourself. Your health is not going to wait for you.
This is true.
You got to take care of yourself.
Right.
You know? So you either going to do it on your own at the gym or walking somewhere on your own or come to a program like this. You know, the good thing about a program like this is that you're not by yourself. You know, you're going to have some fun with it at the same time.
So you started working out at what age?
Probably late 40s.
Okay, and how old are you now?
53.
Okay. And are you in better shape at 53 than you were at 40?
Absolutely. I'm in the best shape. Yes,
And you feel good.
great. Thank you.
I'm going to be 65 in 2 weeks.
65 in 2 weeks. Why do you continue to work out, and why do you think it's important working out over 50?
So I can do this at 70.
So you can do this at 70. That's a good answer.
You know, there are some risks with exercising at any age, but if you've been inactive and you're a little bit older, you do need to watch out for a few things. The main risks are overexertion, joint strain, and of course, the results or the complications of any undiagnosed cardiovascular issues.
If you're over 50 and you've never exercised before, you should not overdo it. Look out for the warning signs, but don't let this be an excuse for not getting up and moving.
Remember to stay fit. For the Armstrong-Williams Show, I'm Dee Bass Wilbon.
Thank you so much. There she is, Miss Dee herself, in that fabulous package. And there's Ms. Nina. So Nina, how has being a mother and staying in shape shaped your work ethic and your leadership style? And how do you use storytelling and film to uplift the role of women and mothers?
Well, I think the most important thing to think about when you're a mom is you're not thinking about just yourself. You're not just taking care of yourself. You're taking care of your children. And what you do reflects to them the kind of person that you are, your moral values, the importance of staying in shape and eating right. And I was raised that way. My parents made sure that we didn't have any sugar in the house, no white rice, no starches, no carbohydrates. We're raised with high protein diets. No one had even heard of yogurt when I was a kid, or a wheat germ. And so it's just, I was raised that way. And so we raised our child that way. And he's very, very healthy and in shape. And I think it's an obligation that we have as parents to raise our children to think about longevity and think about how important it is to stay healthy and eat right. I mean, eating right is so crucial today. You're looking at all the additives they're putting in every product you can imagine. And it's like putting poison in your body, and your body's going to be fighting it back against it. And sometimes your body wins, sometimes you win. But I think we need to learn how to start taking care of ourselves. And in doing that, we do honor our children.
You know, Didi, what do today's mothers combat and fight against the most in raising their kids, whether it's social media, whether it's the classroom, whether it's their circle of influence? And what is it that we need more in this nation of ours in order for you to thrive and others to thrive in raising thriving children who understands discipline and morality? And how can we better support working mothers without forcing them to choose between their career and their family?
Armstrong, I think it's a combination of all of those things. It is very important for mothers to, I think, to stay active and to be active. According to the Chamber of Commerce, in 2023, 74% of mothers with children under the age of 18 were active in the U.S. labor force. And that was up from 2022, when it was 72.9. And that demonstrates the incredible ability for women to be able to be vital parts of the economic contributions, as well as nurturing their families. And so for me as a mom, I love working out. I love being active. My children know that I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning so that I can get my workout in before the whole house is up and moving around. But I encourage my children to work out. My son goes on a walk almost every day. My daughters are very active in doing sports or working out as well. But I think we as a community, we have to work together to make sure that we're encouraging our kids. It's important to me that I'm talking to my kids on a daily basis. You're right, social media and all of the things that are out there that are trying to get our children's attention, that's where they're getting their news from, whether it's Instagram or Snapchat or all the other things that they're looking at. They're getting all that stuff. And so for me as a mom, it's important I have to be there also, so that I know what they're seeing, so that I can talk to them about it and they feel comfortable coming to me to talk to me about certain things. You know, our youngest is about to graduate in 2 weeks from high school and going off to college. So it's very important that we have a very open relationship and that she's able and feel comfortable with coming to me and talking to me just about anything, and knowing that I'm her friend, but I'm going to always be her mom first. And so it's very important to keep an open line of communication with our children so that they feel comfortable in talking to us all the time about every and anything.
You know, Nana, what generational wisdom should we be passing down from mothers to daughters and sons? And how do you balance discipline and compassion in motherhood, especially in today's cultural climate?
Well, I think that we've kind of gotten off track. It was the feminist movement that was telling women, you can have it all. You can have the child. You can have the good job. You can, be an executive in a huge company. You can travel the world, do whatever you want. And what we saw were there were a lot of children that were suffering as a result of that, because they were realizing that with that, wonderful goal of, fulfilling yourself, they were sort of set on the corner and told, mom will be back soon. I don't have time right now, but I'll get back to you. I think there was a song about that, The Cat's in the Cradle. And, and you don't get that time back. I remember when our little boy was little, he would always ask his father, Colby, to hold him, hug him, hold me, Daddy, pick me up. And I think he was about 6 or 7 and he was still doing that. And Colby said something very interesting. He says, I'll never get this time back. I'll never get him at another age to say to me, Daddy, hold me, lift me up. Mm-hmm. And it was to me so precious and so wonderful that they had that fabulous bond that he at any time could just feel comforted by the hug of his father. And I think that's what children want. They don't want the fancy cars and the big houses and the, all the gadgets and stuff. They just want the love of their parents. They want their parents to be there. They want to, as Dee Dee was saying, be able to talk to them about anything, because you only get one shot at it. You only get one set of parents for your entire life. You only get the kids that the Lord has given you and blessed you with for your entire life. So make that a priority. It should be a priority. And I think the kids will respond. I remember saying years ago when I moved my office from Capitol Hill into my house because we had the baby, children don't care what you're doing. I could be cooking, cleaning, ironing, writing a book, whatever. They don't care. They just want you to be there. And I just feel that there was a big lie that was told to women that you can have it all. And it doesn't really matter if you're there. You'll get quality time. That was a big word, quality time with them. Well, on whose terms is that quality time? It never was on the child's terms. It was always on the parents' term, who were looking over their shoulder to see what else was out there that they could do instead of having to be home with their child. So I think it's flipped. I really do believe that people are seeing it now as a calling, as an urgency, an urgent calling, basically, to raise this child with moral values, with a sense of self, with a sense of understanding who they were designed by God to be, what their destiny is. And I believe of all the verses in the Bible, that one, raise a child up in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Well, that's actually translated to identify what their gifts are and raise them around the nurturing of those gifts so that when they do grow up, they fall right into it.
Well, Nina and Dee Dee, thank you both so much for joining us. Happy Mother's Day. You both do a terrific job. We want to thank all our guests. I want to congratulate the 133rd Pope that was just selected a couple of days ago. That dance is over. And also, Ed Martin will not be confirmed as the prosecutor for the District of Columbia. I'm Armstrong Williams, and happy Mother's Day, Mother. You know we love you. We love y'all. Okay, we're out of here.